So just based on what I've heard so far, I am pretty much looking forward to 2.0 Wuthering Waves, and I'm excited to see what else it has to bring.
But with that being said, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. Hitting that like button helps get the video out there. Hitting that subscribe button helps us grow a community over here and helps us grow the channel. And I'll leave a link in the description below for Saintontas' video. Hit that like button for him. Hit that subscribe button for him. I know he makes pretty good Wuthering Waves content. So let's jump right into this.
Wuthering Waves' 6-month anniversary was one of the greatest gifts that could have been given to the player base. The biggest dump of content we've ever seen in preparation for a new region and version of the game. Drip marketing isn't quite the right word to use here. It's more like a flood, and what's clear from the reaction across the entire community.
This was all the drip marketing that kind of like led into other characters. I mean, he can't even fit it all on the screen. Like he's even covering up one character. I would have probably put that character in the foreground above the gun, but oh well. But a lot of interesting characters, and from what I understand, this character right here in the right here, yeah, and then this character that's behind this diamond gun thing is kind of like a street performer magician, and so. Yeah, I'll even say it. The character designs look really good. I'm super excited for all these characters just based on just designs alone.
From the reaction across the entire community is that Kuro cooked and proved that every single harsh critique when it came to their character design and world building was made far too quickly. The level of scrutiny across the gacha community that this company
Is Wuthering Waves just a Genshin clone? Wuthering Waves will inevitably fail. The game did receive quite a bit of criticism at launch, mostly due to how buggy the launch was. But I will also give Wuthering Waves credit for how they handled the launch. And even going as far as to being able to throw a 5-star selector as just sort of a compensation for what's going on. And that wasn't just it. They even threw other ways of compensating the players for the bugs by just handing out materials that help level up and develop our characters. So Wuthering Waves was handling the criticism really well and just being completely transparent about how they plan to fix things. So it's obviously, I'm 100% sure everyone can agree, even Kuro Games can agree that preferably the game would have been better if it didn't launch the way it did, but they at least did the second best thing, which is they handled it really well.
And game were under since its launch was absolutely absurd. And now that Kuro's finally had the time to fully flesh out their vision for this game, it's safe to say that they know exactly what they're doing.
And I would honestly say, and this is another bit of slight criticism towards Saintontas, is I don't think we have yet seen their vision for the game, because from what we understand, they are still trying to work on ways of improving the game when it comes to more ways to make grind easier. And then also, I'm pretty sure that when it comes to the 2.0 launch, they even have further quality of life updates that they probably want to throw at us. And I think with 2.0, I mean, think about it. We're going literally right from 1.4 to 2.0. So I believe that 2.0 is going to draw us probably closer. But this picture right here actually highlights one of the bigger bumps in the road, I should say, of Wuthering Waves' journey, which is 1.2 was just an abysmal update for Wuthering Waves, just because we were on a hype train because 1.1 was so good, but then 1.2 was just a very, very untimely filler update.
Beyond fair to say that Wuthering Waves' patches were a bit lacking ever since the huge map expansion we've had in version 1.1. There are a lot of well-justified reasons for that, and today we'll be taking the time to explore what those reasons are. A lot of people have been saying Gacha's dead for the latter half of 2024.
Alright, a lot of people were saying gachas were dead, mostly because at that time, a lot of gachas were doing their fillers. Wuthering Waves was going back and forth between... Wuthering Waves was definitely on a downhill turn due to the 1.2 update, and then even though the Black Shore story was good in Wuthering Waves, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. It was definitely just in the territory of good. But the problem with Wuthering Waves and Kuro is that their updates are so long, like literally they have a huge development time in between updates compared to other gachas. And Kuro, because of that, after the initial hype of when the Black Shores update dropped, it went down because there's nothing really particularly going on. And the thing is with Genshin is that Natlan has been very lackluster, I would say. It's been received with a lot of just apathy. And then with Honkai Star Rail, that 2.6 update for Honkai Star Rail, oh my god, was that bad. that was not a good update. 2.6 with the Rappa and the banana monkeys, that was bad. That was a very bad update. And then even though Zone Zero is working on improving gameplay and adding more intrigue into the game, it's also doing sort of minor filler updates as well. So that's why everyone was saying gacha's dead, is because there's no interest in gacha. At least at the time. There was no interest in gacha at the time because it just so happened that everyone is kind of in their down period. And even though you can argue Wuwa wasn't because of the Black Shores update, it's just mostly because where Kuro takes so long to pump out updates, it feels like there's nothing going on when there was something kind of going on.
But when Wuthering Waves is just one game in an industry dominated by giants, who's really to blame for that? As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. When designing Renacita, the devs promised that the entire region would be a co-creation between Kuro Games and the player base, promising that the concerns that players raised across version 1.0, with its sparse interaction between playable characters, odd story pacing, and lack of life in the overworld, would be answered. And Renacita, with its vibrant city setting, lively atmosphere, and abundance of interactivity, even among its echoes, is the breath of fresh air that everybody was looking for after 6 months of grinding in desecrated areas like the Desert Highlands or the port city of Guizhou. When you factor in the massive shift in tone in Braguna compared to Jinzhou, and even Mount Firmament and the Black Shores, the difference is clear. This city is alive, and with the introduction of sentient echoes that walk, talk, and interact with each other just like people, the possibilities for storytelling and interactivity across 2.0's quests are higher than ever. Unless this teaser is the biggest bait in gacha gaming, Kuro Games is promising a lot in Renacita just from its setting alone, and that promise becomes even more significant when we review its immaculate drip marketing and cast of playable characters. Kuro took the critiques of a bland, dark color palette in their 1.0 roster to heart when designing their newest additions to the roster, with the most unique blend of aesthetics we've seen thus far. There are 50 shades of magenta, and plenty of other colors on these characters, even if their attribute is clearly something like Glacio. Just like with Carlotta, we saw a similar betrayal of an attribute's typical color with the release of Shorekeeper, having a blue thematic while dealing spectral damage, and the fact that Kuro's opened that level of artistic freedom in their designs means that any future release has that same level of potential. And that's just the colors. The outfits these characters are wearing are also some of the most unique, fashionable, and tasteful we've ever seen. Baggy pantsuits, deep-cut nautical v-necks, and gothic dresses are an aesthetic that we just haven't seen before. It's a dazzling blend of modern design, classic.
Yeah, I agree. All these designs, and I'll even go as far as to say that that was one of the big compliments that I had for Wuthering Waves, is that their character design and really just their animation in general is excellent. Honestly, the only other game that really competes with Kuro Games when it comes to just character designs alone is Honkai Star Rail. And honestly, that is a compliment going toward both games. They just do excellent character designs overall.
classical themes, and straight up Pirates of the Caribbean. If nobody in this lineup fits the bill for you, you've got to be one of the pickiest people on the planet. This diversity, and perhaps most importantly, departure from Gooner bait allegations, can only make this game more and more accessible to a wider portion of the gaming population. Kuro's checked off a lot of the boxes when it comes to their character design in Renacita, and the reaction to their half-anniversary bomb is the only confirmation we need. These characters.
And let me take a step back here.
Let me make this very clear.
I don't have personally a problem with Gooner bait, just because I understand marketing. I understand
What works?
And a lot of people don't like to take the time to understand psychology. And that's the thing about
These marketing teams.
they understand, like a
Good marketing team will understand the psychology of how minds work,
and they know
what works. And as the saying goes, and it will be a timeless saying that will continue to persist until everyone on this planet has come and gone. And it will continue to persist.
is sex sells. And you want to say that these characters aren't going to go for any Gooner bait? Look at Charlotta right now.
Look at this chick.
Look at this chick. In fact, look at the video that was made for her. That was the video that Wuthering Waves made for this character. Going for the look at the legs and then zooming in on her biting the end of her glove while looking directly right at you. It might not be the most obvious Gooner bait I've ever seen, but anyone who recognizes Gooner bait will see that and go, that is some pretty subtle Gooner bait.
Characters are hype, and once again we can see that Kuro's limited content across versions 1.2 to 1.4 wasn't because of some lack of budget, manpower, or resources. It's because they were dedicating so much of their development time towards crafting this unbelievably beautiful region and designing this awesome cast of characters.
And that's fair.
And that's the thing. Like, a lot of people, anyone in the know, I would put it that way.
Anyone in the know will understand that a filler update is a sign that there's something probably more
Coming down the road.
Filler updates are basically a double-edged sword, because unfortunately, due to the fact that it's a filler update, it means that it's just going to create a big lull in the hype that's surrounding your game. And that's what happened with 1.2. My criticism of 1.2 was that, yes, I understood that it was a filler update and there was probably going to be more coming in on later down the road. But the fact still remained is that it was a very untimely filler update. You don't do a filler update on your 1.2. You should have already had something going on, or planned to have something going on to continue the hype, because that's the thing. You just launched your game. You're on 1.2. You need to keep the momentum going to be able to continue to grow your community for your game. And that was my criticism. It wasn't exactly because it was a filler update, even though that's part of the reason. It was because it was untimely. It was very, very just unnecessary. But the Black Shores update was good, but the problem then became you guys are still not capitalizing on momentum, because it takes you guys forever, guys as in Kuro Games, to be able to get to your next update. And so that was the problem with
Kuro Games and Wuthering Waves. A very untimely filler update, and then just a long development cycle.
But I will say that Saintontas is completely right is that if you're doing these filler updates, then you guys better have something good planned down the road to compensate for the fact that you had to unfortunately do filler updates. And hopefully Renacita is that. It's the same thing that goes with, for example, with Honkai Star Rail. 2.6 was 100% a fucking filler update, and a bad one at that. But as we've seen, they did have something planned. 2.7 is anything but a filler update. It actually adds more main story to the game, and it also builds up to 3.0, which is going to be a big installment and a big progression and adding new areas for Honkai Star Rail. And if you guys are coming from Genshin Impact's 0.8 updates are always, or typically are always, filler updates. And the reason Genshin does their filler updates on 0.8 is because 0.8 always leads into their 0.0,
which is always a new area.
That incredible aesthetic didn't end with their outfits. These characters are also offering some of the most interesting or mysterious combinations of weapons we've seen in Solaris, with popular combinations like gunblades, magical staves, a sword and pistol combo, and a tie. All of these characters are promising unique attack animations that will vary wildly from existing wielders on the roster. We've seen what these developers can make firsthand, and if there's one thing Kuro didn't sacrifice across version 1.0, it was the quality of their limited characters' kits. There's no reason for them to stop now. One of the biggest challenges Kuro Games faced across all of version 1.0 was the massive pivot they made when it came to storytelling and world building. According to developer interviews, this shift was one of the hardest parts of the development process across the early months of release. And with that explanation in mind, it makes sense why there seemed to be so little content surrounding the actual main story quest and its progression across the latter half of the version in calendar year. Instead, patches were dedicated to developing the cultural significance of Jinzhou and its festivals in 1.2, the background lore of the Black Shores, the Tethys system, and Rover's Past in 1.3, and the reveal of the Somme Noir's potential for individual character story progression in 1.4. While rewriting the story to better fit the developer and player's vision for the future of Wuthering Waves, Kuro dedicated their updates around laying the groundwork and establishing the foundation for the real story in Wuthering Waves, what we'll be experiencing in 2.0. They rewarded their player base with one of the best half-anniversary gifts possible, an absurd amount of hype for Renacita driven by the reveal of its incredible cast of characters, and uniquely refreshing setting present in this European-inspired region.
And the thing is that they have to definitely capitalize on this, at least when it comes to a narrative and story progression sense, is due to the fact that the weakest link in Wuthering Waves is package, its whole deal, is its narrative. They do actually a pretty good job
going about telling the story, and this has been kind of a theme and a conversation that's been had lately when it comes to gacha games overall,
is that Wuthering Waves is one of those games that does a pretty good job telling its story by offering animated scenes and also having more animation going on when it comes to how their models interact. And that is one of the compliments that definitely helps out Wuthering Waves when it comes to its narrative and how the story is told. But the problem with Wuthering Waves is quite the opposite of the criticism that's been kind of like directed toward Hoyoverse, is that storytelling is not Wuthering Waves' issue. It's the narrative in itself that is the issue. The story of Wuthering Waves is very tropey and falls in line towards somewhat sort of a
harem anime type story where you are like, look at it, the rover shows up, basically been isekai'd into the world, and then as the rover is exploring and discovering this world and meeting the characters, pretty much all the female characters fall head over heels for the rover, and I'm pretty sure some of the males in the story are pretty interested in it as well. But when it comes to the females, they are 100% head over heels. As we saw with Yang Yang is definitely going for the waifu vibes. Jinshi, I get ideas of subtle interest. If Rover asked Chang Li if she wanted to bang, I'm pretty sure Chang Li would be down. And then
the biggest and most hilarious suspects here are the ones that we saw recently with Shorekeeper and Camellia. Those two would fuck Rover any day, anywhere, anytime. They would ask for more probably after the first round. They would ask for a second, third, fourth, fifth, and further rounds. And so, with the jokes out of the way, and I'm not saying I have anything against harem animes. I've seen and watched quite a few animes that have like sort of that harem trope going on. But Wuthering Waves, it seems more harem anime than it does than an anime that's trying to actually tell a tangible story.
Systems like the Elusive Realm, Tethys' Simulations, and the Black Shores as a home base firmly established in the tail end of 1.0, Kuro set up the player base with all the tools they'll need to experience Renacita to the fullest, with all of these existing features directly applicable to the newest members of the roster. And with the PS5 version releasing with 2.0, Wuwa's incorporation of their skip button will let those new players experience the best that Wuwa has to offer in record time.
And that's going to be really big because that just means that they're going to develop and make their community for their game even bigger by popping up on another platform.
The clunky pacing issues we all experienced back in 1.0. I've always said that Kuro Games made enjoying their game as easy as possible, and that's only going to continue in 2.0. Gacha might have died in 2024, and Wuthering Waves' backloaded development for 2.0 definitely contributed to the problem. But the fact of the matter is that Kuro Games was making a massive investment in Renacita across the latter half of 2024, and they're only one developer in an industry dominated by a giant, with a lot more funding, advertising, and budget. When you look at what Kuro's been able to produce as a result of their investment, you can't help but wonder why a company like Hoyoverse, with 3 massive titles in the genre, weren't able to save.
Yeah, well, the thing is that 100%, as we now know with hindsight, since this video came out 2 weeks ago, is ironically, Hoyoverse was doing the same thing when it comes to Honkai Star Rail, and to a lesser extent, Zenless Zone Zero. Because Honkai Star Rail was actually pretty much doing the same thing. It was preparing for the 2.7 and even bigger 3.0 launch for Star Rail. And that should probably launch also around the same time, early January. Whereas Zenless Zone Zero was setting up its 1.4 launch, and 1.4 has so much quality of life and actually a big story they're trying to tell that's pretty much going to act like a soft reboot for the game. Now, Genshin Impact, on the other hand, has nothing really going on because Natlan has been received with so much indifference and apathy that it is kind of disappointing to watch this game fall, but at the same time, it's also not surprising. But that's the thing. As we noticed, these two games were doing the exact same thing that Kuro Games was doing.
Gacha in 2024. Kuro had an excuse. We witnessed it live on November 22nd. What is Hoyoverse's? Where is all that money from FOMO-fueled banners and predatory practices going? It certainly isn't back into the games themselves. Kuro Games openly admitted in interviews the struggles across their development process to the player base. They dedicated a majority of their livestream towards reaffirming their commitment to the game and their players. They promised that they would listen to critiques and implement changes that would satisfy the player base.
And that's absolutely great that Kuro Games has been very transparent and open about listening to feedback and definitely working on improving their game. Because as we all know, at first, Wuthering Waves was pretty much, and still is to this day, designed to just pretty much directly compete with Genshin Impact. And how do you compete with Genshin Impact? You basically do the opposites of what Genshin Impact has been doing. Genshin Impact hates working with player feedback. They will push and push and push and relent against the community until basically they have to. And we saw with Natlan that even though they did implement some positive changes into the game,
it got to the point where it was just pretty much too little too late. Whereas Kuro Games, to their benefit, and I'm happy to see it, they have 100% been very open about saying, hey, we're listening to your feedback, we're working on improving these aspects of the game, and here's sometimes some compensation for these problems you guys had to deal with. So that's all great. It's absolutely great, and I love to see that this kind of developer feedback is being seen with Wuthering Waves.
Followed through on all of their promises in version 1.0, and with all of these reveals for 2.0, they've done nothing but repeat that very same dedication. This game has received a lot of criticism, some of it justified, but a lot of it was completely unwarranted. Many are simply unfamiliar with a developer that genuinely plays and enjoys their own game, and makes changes in line with that philosophy over making as much profit as possible. This is the company that sells limited character dupes in their shop. With a developer like this, it'll only get easier and easier to enjoy this game. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.
But overall, a really good video. Honestly, I'm pretty much on board with what Saintontas is saying here. And I agree that there is a lot to be excited for when it comes to Wuthering Waves. And Kuro Games has been definitely handling Wuthering Waves to great success when it comes to trying to redeem themselves from their pretty sad launch and working on making the game better, and then working on improving the game and setting up a huge launch for 2.0, not only as it being a whole new area and new story beat for the game, but also when they're bringing it to now the PlayStation console. So honestly, great stuff all around for Wuthering Waves, and a good video by Saintontas. But it's going to be very interesting, like I said, now that we have hindsight. Like I said, this video was 2 weeks ago, to see how this game works in a atmosphere where it is kind of sandwiched in the middle between Zenless Zone Zero's 1.4 launch. Like I said, it's going to act like a sort of a soft reboot for that game. And then, as we now know,
Honkai Star Rail is setting up for a 3.0 launch, where it's going to be taking us to a whole new area,
new characters, and new story beats. So this is going to be a very interesting time to see how these gacha games compete with one another. And honestly, at the end of the day, us as a community in the gacha atmosphere,
we win, because we're getting all this really good content from at least these three particular games: Honkai Star Rail, Wuthering Waves, and Zenless Zone Zero.
So with that being said, definitely head down to the comments down below and let me know what you guys are thinking when it comes to the whole Renacita update for Wuthering Waves. And I want to know if you guys are still playing Wuthering Waves. Are you enjoying Wuthering Waves? And are you excited for Wuthering Waves? Or are you excited, or equally as excited, for 3.0 for Honkai Star Rail and 1.4 for Zenless Zone Zero? I want to hear what you guys are thinking. And I'll leave a link in the description below for Saintontas' video. Definitely hit that like and subscribe button for him. He makes really good Wuthering Waves content. And so I definitely recommend you guys check out his channel if you want someone who, or want to check out someone who plays a lot of Wuthering Waves. And while you're at it, hit that like and subscribe button for me. Hitting that like button helps get the video out there. Hitting that subscribe button helps grow community over here and helps grow the channel. So if you guys could do that, I greatly appreciate it. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys later.